Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. We finally got a new release date for Starfield, which is really exciting and kind of a bummer. It's complicated, so let's get into it. So basically what happened is Bethesda put out this really short, like 2-minute video to make two major announcements. The first being that Starfield Direct that we've all been looking forward to is going to happen on June 11th, the exact same day as the Xbox E3 but not E3 showcase, which is really exciting. Basically, it just means June 11th is going to be a hell of a day for Xbox fans because we're getting two showcases back to back. Now, yes, granted, one of them is going to be entirely about Starfield, which, depending on how long it is and sort of what they show of it, probably won't, resonate for all viewers. It might be a little too long for some people who just want like trailer. So hopefully those people will still get something out of it. But regardless, the second announcement that they made is the one that has most people hung up, which is that the new release date for Starfield is September 6th of 2023. The reason that some people are upset about this, if you don't know, is because last June at the Xbox E3 showcase, they showed all these games and they said everything we just showed is going to be out in the next 12 months. And I think there were some things in that showcase that we all intrinsically knew were not going to be out in the next 12 months, like the Kojima partnership game that they announced. And me personally, I don't think I ever really believed that Hollow Knight Silksong was going to be out the next 12 months. And now that we're pretty close to the end of those 12 months, I think it's pretty safe to say so. And one of the games that they showed was Starfield, which now that we have a release date of September, we know, yes, in fact, it is outside of that window. And that's a bummer. I completely understand people being upset about that because, it's pretty cut and dry, right? Xbox made a promise, they didn't deliver on that promise. Grr, right? I understand people being upset about that, especially because Xbox didn't need to put that window on it, right? It was a pretty bold statement, and I think one that most of us were expecting to fail on some degree. So it probably wasn't the best idea for them to make such a bold statement at the top of that show. And now we're seeing sort of the consequences of that. Now, on the other hand, there are, of course, some people online who are taking the delay way too hard and just really making asses of themselves online and just crying and moaning and all this stuff. And that's way too much, right? Because I think we're at a place, us video game fans in general, where we understand that a delay isn't the end of the world. In fact, in most cases, it's a good thing, right? If a game is delayed, it means that it wasn't ready to be put out. We don't want to play a game that's not ready to be put out. So if it needs to be delayed to get to a state where it is fun to play and good, by all means, take all the time you need. I think that's the general attitude that most video game enthusiasts have. Now, again, I think people can both understand that and still be upset about this delay because of the promise that was made. It's a complicated sort of situation where you can completely understand that a delay is a good thing and still be mad that there was a delay, or at least disappointed that there was a delay. And I think that's fine. It's just that small group of people who have taken it way too far and are being just real jerks online who we're just not going to talk about them, right? But me personally, I'm really not all that mad about it. And it really comes down to two major reasons. The first is what we saw in this video, the 2-minute video that they put out. They showed a little bit of gameplay and some other stuff. And I think we can already pretty definitively say that the delay has been worth it, right? This game was supposed to come out last November. And I think when they showed off that gameplay in previous June, people weren't super thrilled with it. And we can see from the gameplay they showed here that it's had some major improvements. Most people are pointing out, of course, that the frame rate is noticeably better, right? It seems like it's, if not 60, at least pretty close to it, and it certainly was not that before. Me personally, I think the visuals just across the board look better. I think the lighting looks good. The the terrain of the world that they were on looks a lot better than what they showed at the previous gameplay, which granted they for some reason chose a planet that was a barren wasteland with just a couple of rocks on it, which was probably not the best decision, but who am I? And we saw some really cool new monster designs, right? So I think we can already pretty definitively say the delay was worth it. It is a good thing, and it is going to pay off in the long run. And then the other thing that I sort of think about is how it's just the timing of it, right? There are so many games coming out this year, and really big games too, right? You know, Resident Evil 4, Spider-Man, the Dead Space remake, you know, all of this stuff, right? And a lot of it is stuff I really want to play. I actually made a list, and of the things that have solid release dates for this year, there are 33 games that I still want to play. And then there's another probably 10 more that don't have solid release dates yet, and even more that if you count my backlog. Like, as far as having things to play, I am not concerned whatsoever. I'm going to be very busy for a very long time. And most of those release dates are in the first half. Right now, the only games that we know about, or major games at least, that we know about coming out in the second half, to my knowledge, are Baldur's Gate 3, and now Starfield, right? There's a lot of stuff we can also assume is going to be in the second half, but we don't have solid release dates for it, like Spider-Man. So I completely understand them sort of claiming land in that second half as soon as possible, because then instead of having to pick your release date around where everyone else is, everyone else has to do that for you. Basically, now that they've staked their claim to September 6th, all of these other companies, like PlayStation with Spider-Man 2, have to decide whether or not they want to go up against Starfield or how much breadth they want to give it. Now, Spider-Man 2 could probably go up against Starfield pretty closely, just because they won't exist on the same platforms. Spider-Man 2 is only going to be on PlayStation, whereas Starfield is going to be only everywhere else except Switch. So I think they could probably get away with being pretty close to each other, but the majority of other things I think are going to give them a pretty wide berth. And so I think that they've really set themselves up for success there. And the other thing to keep in note is that Xbox has 5 first-party games coming out this year that we know about. Hi-Fi Rush, which is already out, Redfall, Starfield, Minecraft Legends, and Forza Motorsport, which I think it's pretty safe to say that's also going to be a second half of the year kind of game. If I had to guess, I would say October, just because if it was going to be first half of the year, I feel pretty confident that we would have had a release date for it by now, unless they're going to shadow drop it in June, which is almost certainly not going to happen. So that's also probably going to be second half, just while we're, bracing for the disappointment. So you want to space those out, right? You don't want to have just like a super heavy first half of the year and then only Starfield. The other thing is, with Starfield coming out in September, I think it's also pretty safe to say that some of the other things that we were expecting to get at the end of the year, or maybe expecting is too strong of a word, hoping to get at the end of this year, like Avowed or Hellblade 2, are pretty unlikely, right? I think we're looking at a second half that is going to be Forza Motorsport and Starfield. And then they'll probably push Avowed, because you don't want to put Avowed and Starfield out next to each other, because they're both these big open world RPGs, and you don't want to, right? So I think Avowed will probably get pushed to like next spring or next summer, and then Hellblade 2 will be like next fall, next winter, right? And those would be sort of the headliners for 2024, if I had to guess. That's what I would do anyway. So just want to make sure everyone is setting their expectations correctly. And actually, speaking of setting your expectations correctly, there are people who are putting way too much pressure on Starfield. There are people who are like, this has to be a 10 out of 10. This is the most important game Xbox has ever put out. This is going to be the best game ever made. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be all this. It's going to in the kitchen sink. And I'm sorry to say, realistically, it's probably not going to be. It's going to be like a high 8, low 9, probably. I'm happy with that. That's what I'm expecting, right? It's going to be, at the end of the day, when it comes out, it's going to be a video game, right? It's going to have bugs. It's going to have issues. There's going to be maybe some weird storylines or like bad voice acting. Like it's going to have issues. And I think people need to come to terms with that, because the way I hear some people talking about this game, they're expecting it to just blow everything else out of the water that's ever come before. And that's just not going to happen, But just to sort of wrap it all up, I completely understand people being upset about this delay, but I think by the time this game comes out, we'll all understand that it was well worth it and overall probably the right choice. And for the people who right now are saying that they won't, the people who are going insane online and just really crying and making fools out of themselves, well, they'll probably find something else to complain about by next week, so I wouldn't be all that concerned about them. But I'm actually really curious what you guys think about this delay. Are you super mad about it and you're screaming at your TV that there's some aspect of this that I'm not taking into account? Or are you okay with it and excited because there's some other games that you were hoping that you'd have time to play and now you do? I'm genuinely really curious as to what the sort of average feeling on this is, because I feel like I'm only seeing the extremes online right now. And while you're down in the comments telling me how you feel about this, why don't you also like the video, subscribe to the channel maybe. We're getting pretty close to 1,000 subscribers, and I'd really love to hit that number sooner rather than later, because it's where we can really start to do some exciting things here on the channel. And I literally cannot do it without your guys' help. So subscribe to the channel, share it with a friend, and until next time, I'll see you around.